This session is purely for our blooming robotic surgeons, and this is the 12th RSC meeting, and the topic and focus is on tips and tricks used in robotic surgery. Well, hysterectomy is the most common gynecological procedure being performed worldwide, and the quest to have an improved patient outcome has always been a driving force for us to go for novel technologies, including robotics. But then, like in any other surgery here again, we have to follow certain technical steps. The most important technical step in any surgery will be positioning. So place your patient in a dorsal lithotomy position with the legs abducted, thighs at the level of the table, and knees flexed. Well, here aligning your heel, knees, and contralateral shoulder is important because this is going to avoid injuries to the peroneal nerve. After positioning, it's good to go for a bimanual examination because this will help you in strategizing your port placement. After that, use your uterine manipulator. This will help you in identification of the interface of cervix and vagina. That will be helpful in going ahead with the colpotomy if needed. Also, it identifies the uterovesical fold of peritoneum. The arm should be padded and tucked at the sides. Well, place the patient in a steep Trendelenburg position. This helps in the optimal visualization of the pelvic organs, also keeps your small and large bowel away from the field of surgery. It's important to collaborate with your anesthesia team because you will be creating pneumoperitoneum, prolonged hours of surgery, and the patient is a steep Trendelenburg position. And you'll be, fiddling with the arms because arms are tucked at the sides. So please collaborate with the anesthesia team. Further talking about the trocar placement and the port placement. See, the placement of the trocar depends on many things. These are procedure plan, whether you're going for the simple hysterectomy, radical hysterectomy, sacrocolpopexy, the size of the uterus, type of pathology, whether it's a benign or malignant, and the number of the robotic arms and the system being used by the surgeon. The camera port can be placed 8 to 10 centimeters cephalad to the uterine fundus, or it's in and around the umbilicus. This is for this simple benign hysterectomy where the size of the uterus is normal. But it can be different for the malignant cases. But here, because we are discussing just the benign cases, so I'll be sticking to the benign thing. In 3-arm placement, arm 1 should be inserted on the patient's right side, arm 2 should be inserted on the left side. The assistant port can be on the either side of the patient, and if the surgeon is using 4th arm, that should be on the contralateral side of the assistant port. Well, this is how it looks like in a SI system, the arch-like manner. If you are using XI, it will be more of in a straight line. Well, accessing abdomen is, I think this is one of the most critical step in any minimal invasive surgery. And this can be done either by a closed technique or an open technique, closed by direct entry with or without optical trocar, or you can use a Veress needle prior to the insertion of the trocar. But the use of Veress needle can be associated with increased incidence of failed entry, extraperitoneal insufflation, or mental injury. A reliable indicator that you are well in place is like Veress intraperitoneal pressure should be less than 10 millimeters mercury. Some surgeons, they may use Palmer's point for the Veress needle insertion. This is 2 to 3 centimeters below the left subcostal margin in the mid-clavicular line. And the reason is here, this does have a lesser subcutaneous fat, as well as if there's a history of laparotomy in the past, here the chances of adhesions are far less. The other method is open or the Hassen's technique, where it's like a mini laparotomy entry. A cannula with cone-like sleeve is inserted. The peritoneal edge and fascia are then tagged and attached to the cannula, and here how it looks like. As I said, accessing abdomen is important, so there are certain guidelines for the safe primary trocar entry. You should aim at the right angle to the skin and then readjust 45 to 90 degrees based on the BMI of the patient. Aim at the sacral hollow, always away from the pelvic vessels. Extend your index finger on the trocar. This is to prevent sudden thrust of the trocar. You can always rotate in a semicircular fashion. Advance not more than 2 to 3 centimeters beyond the peritoneum. Once you enter the peritoneum, you should always go for a complete survey of the abdomen to rule out any visceral injury during the trocar or Veress needle insertion. Inspect the target organ, inspect the ureters. I think for us benign gynecologists, we are all scared of the ureters. And this will help you in strategizing your steps of surgery. So I think the surgeon should always be prepared with a plan B. So if you're not able to enter peritoneum with the conventional approaches, use alternative techniques. And these are transvaginal approach or transuterine approach. We usually don't use these approaches, but then yes, it is there. For the transvaginal, insert a long Veress in the midline of the taut posterior fornix. This is usually helpful in obese women and those with the contraindications to umbilical and left upper quadrant entry, but then contraindicated in patients with retroverted uterus and prior pelvic infections. Transuterine, here the patient is placed in the Trendelenburg position and the uterus is anteverted, prior to the long Veress insertion through the fundus of the uterus. This is helpful again in obese women and those with contraindications to umbilical and left upper quadrant entry, but then contraindicated in patients with fibroid uterus or who are undergoing infertility workup. And this is how it will look like. The first one is the trans-cul-de-sac or the transvaginal, the second transuterine. But usually we don't go for such approaches because of the higher incidence of bowel injury or infections. Well, there can be situations which can distort the pelvic anatomy, and these are fibroid uterus, endometriosis, or severe adhesions because of prior cesarean section or myomectomy, dense ovarian adhesions, and obesity. In such cases, use angled scopes, use ureteral stents, you can use firefly technology for illuminating your ureters, use a uterine manipulator with a well-fitted obturator. It's good to always take an easier pedicle and then going back to the difficult ones. Strategizing your surgery, I think this is the most important thing. A surgery with lots of pauses, stops, and changes is always prolonged one than a planned one. So the moment you enter the peritoneum, abdomen, you should take a minute, plan your surgery, and go ahead. So starting with the round ligament first, coagulate the round ligament in the middle of the triangle which you can see there in the picture. Now this triangle is bordered on the top by the taut round ligament. Laterally it's the iliac veins and medially it's the adnexal vein. Now this way the surgeon keeps a safe distance from the adnexal vein and limits the risk of bleeding. Coagulation should be intermittent and short. Next, well, that depends whether you want to conserve the ovaries or sacrifice the ovaries. And if you're planning to conserve the ovaries, go ahead with the coagulation of the uterovarian ligaments. And the tip here is to hug the ovaries. The reason is this will keep a safe distance from your uterochordal end, hence securing hemostasis. And if you are planning to sacrifice the ovaries, coagulate and cut the infundibular pelvic ligament, again here it's good to create a hole in the posterior leaf of the broad ligament and hug the ovary. This will prevent ureteric injuries. Talking about the vesicouterine peritoneal fold, it's good to lift the bladder nicely, stay in the areolar tissue. So this tissue everywhere, wherever you find, it is a surgeon-friendly plane. So hug the cervix. At the end of the fold formation, watch for the air or blood in the urobag. I think uterine artery ligation or coagulation, this is one of the most important steps in any hysterectomy. And there are 4 ways. These are conventional, anterior approach, posterior approach, lateral approach. First, talking about the conventional or the medial. This is the most common way of doing uterine artery ligation in most of the hysterectomies. Here we open or dissect the anterior and posterior leaf of the broad ligament, skeletonize the uterine arteries, and coagulate the ascending branch of the uterine artery at the level of the isthmus at 90 degrees. The tip here is you have to pull the uterus scapulate so that the ureters fall away from the uterine vessels and then you can coagulate. The other, it's The other way is the anterior approach. Here the ligation or coagulation of the ascending branch of the uterine artery is done without opening the posterior broad ligament. Now, here the UV fold is identified and the bladder is dissected down to the cup, and then coagulation is done. This is good for the uterus with large fibroid with poor accessibility to the cul-de-sac. Also, large fibroid not maneuverable by the manipulator. But this is definitely not good for the patients with fibrosis in the parametrium from endometriosis or prior surgeries. Talking about the posterior approach, here ligation of the ascending branch of the uterine artery is done without developing a bladder flap. Going ahead with the adhesiolysis after you secure the blood vessels is good because this limits bleeding, and this is going to make your surgery simpler and easier. This is excellent in patients with extensive dense uterine adhesions to the bladder and anterior abdominal wall. Technically, this is not usually available for the open surgeries. Talking about the lateral approach, this is commonly done in the patients with CS cervix for radical hysterectomy. And in benign surgeries, we can use it for patients with extensive adhesions, especially in endometriosis. Here, the ligation or the coagulation is done at the origin of the uterine arteries. With certain tips here, pulling the uterus cephalid helps to move the uterine vessels away from the ureters and hence preventing injury to the ureters. It is important to take the uterine vessels high and then dissect medially to the uterine vessels down to the cup. Now this way, it provides a healthy uterine pedicle that can be safely desiccated further in the event of bleeding. Time of exposure to the coagulation should be as brief as possible. Now this is because to prevent lateral thermal injury. We know ureters are right next to it, so you don't want any ureteric injury. Measures have been taken to avoid incidents of vaginal cuff dehiscence in the post-op period, and this can be achieved by doing efficient colpotomy. And we can do it by using the cutting mode of electrocautery. You can incorporate 5 millimeters of healthy vaginal tissue from the edge. You can incorporate posterior peritoneum as well as uterosacral ligaments when you're closing the cuff. Well, bleeding interferes with the surgical maneuvers, and definitely for that you will require strict hemostasis. This can be achieved by meticulous dissection and coagulation, having a good proficiency in the bipolar coagulation, staying in an anatomical cleavage of the surgery, and having a good and having a perfect knowledge of your anatomy. Well, the next statement may look little odd, that like do not irrigate, only apply only suction, because most of the times we are used to go use lavage. But then it is clear that we do use lavage in an event of extensive hemorrhage and at the end of the surgery. But then it does have certain disadvantages, and these are, we can have a loss of exposure because the operating space is reduced when it is filled with liquid, and the pneumoperitoneum pressure may come down because when it the liquid is suctioned out. The light is absorbed and reflected by the liquid, and that can make us little biased. Loss of anatomical planes due to tissue edema. Loss of electrical efficiency when an electrolyte solution is used. There can be spread of the liquid throughout the abdominal cavity, which can be disastrous in presence of malignancy, infection, and dermoid cyst. Last but not the least, it's always good to train your team, be it your paramedic, your assistants, because that is going to help in the end and make your surgery and uneventful. Thank you. Any questions?
How to take care of problems as well. Yeah, that was I think a very good way of revising it from the beginning. And I think yes, absolutely. Thanks.